Okay, so we're back here again, and as promised, I'm going to be doing, well, not really a review as such, since there are plenty of other videos on here that already go into the plot and story of each books, but I am going to just give general thoughts on how the story holds up now compared to when I read it first in the 90s. And I will be briefly comparing it to its Horrorland counterpart, Say Cheese and Die Screaming. So this was book number 2 here in England as part of the British Goosebumps release. As if memory serves correct, this would be classified as book number 4 in the American order. So how does it hold up now compared to when I first read it as a kid? It still has the same sort of slow burn opening that I remember, but my main frustration, I guess, would be with the Greg character, who clearly gets his hands on the cursed camera. As you can see, obviously that's the main sort of semi-villain of the piece. Greg takes a few pictures, yet still sits on the shelf when it comes to getting rid of the camera. And this is clearly seen in the scene with Joey and Mickey, the two bullies, when they get their hands on the camera. You think that, okay, well, it's a cursed item, I've taken several pictures, they've all pretty much turned out bad. Now these two bullies have got their hands on it, maybe I should just leave it in their hands, and so Spidey can become their problem. Does he do that? No, of course not. He immediately tries to grab the camera and holds onto it until the end of the book. So I don't understand his thing. The overall story is actually still pretty interesting for the most part. I mean, really. It holds up extremely well for a book that was actually written in the 90s. Though there are actually certain elements that did bring up some questions, which obviously when you're a kid you don't really question things. One of the biggest and main things would be when Spidey reveals the origin of the camera, and that the inventor was evil, who put a curse on the camera, stealing, and also then goes on to explain about the primitive tribes who believe in having their souls stolen when they get their pictures taken and stuff. Now, had he just said that the camera was cursed by the inventor, that would be more than enough of an explanation, especially for a children's book. That would be more than enough to keep people saying, okay, right, we've got a brief origin story. It's when he mentioned the idea of the camera stealing the soul that stood out the most, which, of course, like I said, when you're a kid, it just goes over your head. You don't really focus too much on the details. But as an adult and as a writer myself, that was the main thing that really captured my interest. And that made me think about the people who had their pictures taken. Greg's dad ending up in the car crash, his two friends, one who was hit in the head in the baseball game, the other one who fell through the railing, and of course the main female character, obviously his female best friend, Sherry or Shari. Okay, you know what? With this type of spelling, I have no idea how you pronounce her name properly, but I assume the general pronunciation is Sherry, so we'll just go with that. Her disappearance for 2 days, and then, 1 minute she's there, next minute she's not. Now, ultimately, he doesn't really give too many details as to what actually happens to. Okay, how's the best put this? I would actually go on to say that really what should have happened was that each character, after having their picture taken, for the moment they feel fine, and then the next minute their personality changes. And so what do I mean by personality change? I mean, as in the camera does actually steal their soul. They come back changed, altered. Certain characteristics that were, possibly, that could be classified as personality traits or quirky elements of the people that Greg knew are missing. So when his dad comes back from the hospital, his dad is no longer his dad. When Sherry comes back from wherever the hell she was trapped, the void in between worlds, the space between spaces, wherever she was, when she comes back, something is missing from her. And I know that actually sounds a little bit on the weird side of things, but it does feed into the idea of the explanation about the camera stealing your soul, since that is actually mentioned in the book. Although, like I said, they don't really go into detail over it. That was a very interesting aspect of the story that if I had written this, I would have focused on it a little bit more. And as someone who actually suffered a nightmare in which I may have possibly sold my soul, or at least traded my soul for safety, that was something that stuck with me, actually. Like I said, when I was a kid, this book went over my head. I just took it for what it was. But then I began thinking about the soul, and then that got me thinking about a nightmare scenario that I had, in which I was at a comic book convention hunting down Morbius the Living Vampire, issue number 16, and then being chased by some sort of living gargoyle style creature, which wasn't really a gargoyle, but it was a demonic creature that was chasing me all over the place. I couldn't escape. Eventually I found a way out, but I ended up spiraling into darkness, and I was spiraling and spiraling and spiraling, and I reached out for anyone to help me out. Next thing you know, I'm up, I'm awake, I get on with my day, brush my teeth, eat breakfast, do all the usual stuff, and it was only around about lunchtime on that day that I felt something missing, something had been taken away from me. I didn't know what it was, and then I started thinking about the nightmare that I had. And just for a brief moment, I entertained the idea that maybe, just maybe, while in the void, in the darkness, I had sold my soul to a demonic entity. And it was the demonic entity that pulled me out. Now, obviously, being a writer, I decided to capitalize on that by introducing something known as the Nedkai in my own book, which is Aliens, 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 which is the first book in the Chronicles of the Seventh Reign series. I don't go into detail of it, but I do actually mention the Nedkai, which is something that is part of the mythology that I've created for that book. But I do expand on it in the second book, which is Drama School Terror. That has yet to be published, but I have plans to have it released before the end of this year, possibly around about the Halloween time period. And if you're interested, this book is now available for free to read on Wattpad. All you gotta do is go onto wattpad.com, put down Saftamataki CH94, and you can actually have access to this book for free. You don't have to pay anything. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because I know that lots of people make comments such as attacking and trashing somebody else's work, somebody else's movie, somebody else's TV show. And so then comes what we call it, the thing, well, why don't you put your money where your mouth is, you know? If you're so great, if you're so good, why don't you give it a shot? Why don't you try writing a book and seeing how you do well as a storyteller? So that's exactly what I've done. Okay, so I'm not just here trying to attack R.L. Stine or trash his books or highlight some of the more negative elements of whatever. I do actually put my money where my mouth is. I have actually written my own fiction, therefore you actually have something to compare it to, assuming you're actually even remotely interested in seeing what I have to offer. So, back to Goosebumps, Say Cheese and Die. Yes, the soul element, the camera stealing the soul, I would have done a hell of a lot more with that since I introduced it. Otherwise, to be honest with you, he just had to say that the camera was cursed, and that would be more than enough. But because he introduced the soul element, you now have a new dynamic you could have added to the book. But overall, it still holds extremely well. And so that brings us over here to Say Cheese and Die Screaming. So, what does this one have that's better? Well, first of all, the character of Julie is a more active character than Greg, in that once she discovers that the camera that she has takes a bad picture, she actually does everything in her power to get rid of it. So she's not just hanging around. She doesn't sit on the shelf the way Greg does. She immediately tries to get rid of the camera, even though the camera refuses to go away. There are two female characters called Becca and Greta, which I guess you could say are stand-ins for the Joey and Mickey character. And the origin for this camera, whereas this camera, the origin was, it was an evil inventor who built it, placed a curse on it, to make sure that nobody could profit from his invention. This camera that's featured here seems to have a different origin story, as it was made for a movie called Say Cheese and Die Screaming. And to be honest with you, I actually think that the origin story for the cursed camera is way better than the one that was introduced here. Because just saying that it was a cursed camera made for a movie, it's giving you the right amount of information without having to need to go into complete detail or making you ask a whole bunch of questions as to, okay, well, how is it cursed? How did this happen? How did that happen? and who invented it for the movie, and why was it cursed, or, all the usual questions that tend to hit you after you've had a chance to reflect on everything. This book also features a nice throwback to the original book with the photo revealing the students as skeletons, which is seen in a dream sequence, although it's a much more graphic nightmare than the one featured here. And obviously that dream sequence that was featured in this book was also the main cover of the original Goosebumps book. And this one actually unfolds at a much more faster pace. So this one doesn't, it's more like a roller coaster ride as it's going through. And if I had to make a decision as to which one you would, if it became a coin toss between which one to go for, say Cheese and Die the original, or say Cheese and Die Screaming, I would go and say that you would be better off with, say, Cheese and Die Screaming, mainly because it's a far more entertaining book than, say, Cheese and Die. Unless you're interested in just sampling and reading everything from the original classic series, ultimately I think this book would be considered the superior story. That being said, however, there is one thing I like about these re-release books. Hold on, where are we? Well, yes, here. Story Starter. This I like a lot, this new feature that they've actually put in this book. It's whereby they've given you a scenario and then you have to finish it off yourself. So yeah, like working with a friend, pick one of the following 4 creepy introductions. Each of you should write your own story of what happens after the introduction. This I think is fantastic. For anyone who wants to really start getting into creative writing or storytelling of any kind, but your own imagination is not yet strong enough to come up with original stories of your own, this would be perfect. I mean, look at these exercises right here. That would be more than enough to actually start teaching you the joy of writing your own stories. And I really, really wish, as someone who was actually really heavily interested in writing his own stuff back in the day, it would be absolutely awesome to have a page like this in the back of the original Goosebumps books. But the fact that they've actually got something like this now, even in the re-release, it's like, okay, cool. That's fantastic. And this is what I love about the re-release books. If there's one thing you want to get with the re-released Goosebumps, is all this stuff. This is definitely something that I think all books, all children's books, should have. A page at the back which allows you to have multiple scenarios, and then you get the opening of the story, and then you have to use your own imagination to finish it. So yeah, this book is worthwhile to get for that. But in terms of its original story, it's take it or leave it. But this one, definitely you're going to have a lot of fun with. And since there isn't really a hell of a lot else to say, as I've said, I could have gone into the details of each book, but there are plenty of other videos on here who've already beaten me to it, so let's leave it at that, shall we?